The snow started falling around 4 in the afternoon on Christmas Eve, and by the time my son's car pulled into the driveway, the porch light was throwing yellow circles onto a fresh inch of white. I stood at the kitchen window with a dish towel in my hand, watching them unload presents from the trunk. My son moved with that confident, sharp-edged energy he'd had since he was a teenager. His wife came around the passenger side, balancing 2 casserole dishes and a wine bottle under her arm. Their boy, my grandson, 10 years old now, ran ahead to the snow without a coat on. I should have been happy. A father's supposed to be happy when his family comes home for Christmas. Instead, I felt the same low, steady hum I'd been feeling for about 3 weeks, like a refrigerator in the next room you can't quite tune out. I'm 67 years old. I worked 38 years as a marine surveyor up and down the coast of Maine, climbing in and out of fishing boats and cargo hulls in every kind of weather a man can stand. My wife passed 4 winters ago. Ovarian cancer, and after that the house got too big and too quiet, but I never could bring myself to sell it. She picked the wallpaper in the dining room. She planted the lilacs. The house wasn't really mine alone, even with her gone. It was ours. My son is 41. He works in commercial real estate down in Boston, the kind of job where everyone wears a nice watch and nobody can quite explain to you what they actually do all day. He drives a German car. He has opinions about wine. He used to be a sweet kid who built model airplanes with me on the kitchen floor. I don't know exactly when that boy turned into the man walking up my front steps, but somewhere between graduate school and his second promotion, something in him got hard and impatient. His wife, I've never quite figured out. She smiles a lot. She compliments my furniture. She has a way of asking you questions about your health that make you feel like you're being assessed for an insurance policy. "Dad," my son said when I opened the door. He hugged me with one arm, the other still holding a shopping bag. "You losing weight? You look skinnier." "I'm the same," I said. Maybe." His wife kissed my cheek. "Cold from the car. It smells incredible in here. Did you make the rib roast?" "In the oven." "At what temperature? You know they did that whole study on undercooked beef in 325, I said. "Same as I've made it for 40 years. She smiled a little smile. My grandson barreled past us into the living room and threw himself onto the rug in front of the tree. That was the only part that felt right. Kids don't fake. We had drinks. My son poured. He brought a bottle of bourbon I didn't recognize, expensive looking, and made a small show of explaining it to me. I nodded at the right places. The hum in my chest got louder. Around 6, I went into the kitchen to baste the roast and check the rolls. Through the open doorway, I could hear my son and his wife talking low in the den, not arguing, just that married couple murmur, the kind that means a real conversation. I stood at the oven with the door cracked, and I listened. I want to be clear about something. I'm not the kind of man who eavesdrops. I'm not curious about other people's business. But I've been hearing things for weeks. Phone calls cut short when I walked into the room. My son asking offhand questions about my cholesterol, my balance, whether I still drove at night. His wife sending me articles about successful aging communities. 3 weeks earlier, my son had asked, completely out of the blue, if I'd ever thought about getting a memory test. I'd laughed it off. I wasn't laughing now. "The stairs are the real concern," my son was saying. "If he falls, that's it. We're driving up here at midnight to deal with a hospital. He's not going to fall. He could. And the heating bill on this place. Mom and Dad would be so much more comfortable on the single floor." I nearly dropped the basting brush. "They're really willing to sell the condo?" "They want to. The market's right. And honestly, this house has 4 bedrooms my dad doesn't use. It's wasted space. He rattles around in here like a dried pea. What about him, though?" There was a pause. I could hear the fire popping in the den fireplace. "Lakeside has that memory care wing now. We toured it. It's nice. He'd have meals cooked, people to play cards with. Has he agreed?" "He hasn't been asked. But he's not going to say no, sweetheart. He's lonely. He's been lonely since Mom died. He doesn't want to admit it. We just need to present it the right way. After the holidays, I'll bring the brochure up. Easy. And the deed? He had the talk with his lawyer last spring about putting the house in a trust for our boy. It hasn't been executed yet. If I can get him to do a quitclaim instead, transfer it to me directly before he goes into Lakeside, we save a fortune in estate stuff. Mom and Dad move in, we use it as a family base. The appreciation is ours. Won't he ask why? I'll tell him it's tax planning. He won't read past page 2. He never does. I closed the oven door very, very slowly, so the click wouldn't carry. I can't fully describe what happened to me in that minute. I'd raised that boy. I co-signed on his first car. When he failed his bar exam the first time, I'd sat with him at the same kitchen table and told him the world wasn't over. I'd given him the down payment on his condo. I'd never asked for any of it back. I'd never wanted to. And he was standing in my den, in a house his mother decorated, planning to put me in a memory care unit so he could move his other parents into our bedroom. I want to say I felt rage. The honest truth is that I felt nothing for about 5 seconds. Just a clean, blank, mechanical quiet. Then something underneath that quiet started to organize itself. Like cargo getting lashed down on a deck before a storm, I picked up the wooden spoon and stirred the gravy. I called out light and easy, dinner in 10. I could hear the den go silent. We ate. I asked about my grandson's hockey team. I let my son carve. I laughed at his wife's stories about her sister's dog. I drank 1 glass of bourbon and made it last. Nobody at that table had the slightest idea anything was different. When they left around 10, the boy asleep in the back seat, my son giving me a long, performative hug at the door. I stood on the porch and watched the taillights go down the road and around the bend. I went back inside. I sat in my armchair. I didn't turn the television on. I didn't cry. I didn't pour another drink. I just sat there and started to think. The next morning was Christmas Day. I made coffee. I called nobody. I opened the gift my son had left under the tree for me. A cashmere sweater, beautiful, the wrong size, and I folded it back into the box. Then I sat down at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and I made a list. The first item on the list was lawyer. Not my old lawyer. My old lawyer played golf with my son's father-in-law. I needed somebody new, somebody who didn't know my last name. The second item was doctor. 3 of them, ideally. Cognitive assessments, dated, signed, sealed. If anybody ever tried to claim I'd been confused or coerced when I made my decisions, I wanted a paper wall they couldn't climb. The third item was realtor. Discreet. From out of town if possible. Someone who could move quietly. The fourth item was bank. Move the accounts. Quietly. The fifth item was time. I needed to buy myself somewhere between 2 and 4 months. During that time, my son could not, under any circumstances, suspect that I had heard a single word. That was the hardest part. Not the legal work. Not the financial work. The acting. I started the next week. I called a law firm 2 towns over, a woman who specialized in elder protection, and I drove 45 minutes through slush to meet her in her office. I told her everything. She listened with her chin in her hand. When I was done, she took off her reading glasses and said, "Mister, what you've described is one of the most common elder abuse setups I see, and you caught it at the perfect moment. We have options." She walked me through them. An irrevocable trust, a durable power of attorney that specifically excluded my son. Capacity affidavits. A sale of the property to a third party at fair market, with the proceeds moved into the trust before any quitclaim conversation could begin. "There's one catch," she said. "If you sell the house, you have to actually leave it. They will come for you. The minute they realize what's happened, they will come knocking, and there will be a scene. You should be somewhere they can't easily reach you for at least the first 30 days. I thought about it. I've always wanted to take a long trip on a boat. She smiled for the first time. Then take one. The cognitive assessments I scheduled over 3 weeks at 3 different practices. 2 in Portland, 1 in Bangor. I drove myself. I took the tests cold sober and well rested. I scored, in the words of one of the doctors, in the highest decile for your age cohort. All 3 reports got copied, notarized, and locked in my lawyer's safe. The realtor was a man my lawyers recommended, based out of New Hampshire. He came up in an unmarked sedan in mid-January, walked through the house once, made notes on a clipboard, and gave me a number. The number was higher than I expected. I told him I wanted a fast, quiet sale. Cash if possible. No sign in the yard. He found a buyer in 18 days, a retired couple from Connecticut who'd been shopping for a coastal property. They wanted 30 days to close. I said yes. Now here's where the acting started. Through January and February, my son called every Sunday like clockwork. He'd never called every Sunday before. Suddenly, he was concerned. How was I sleeping? Was I eating? Had I thought any more about simplifying my life? His wife sent me a real estate brochure for Lakeside, the memory care place, which I returned to her with a polite handwritten note saying it looked very nice and I'd keep it on file. In late January, my son came up alone for a weekend. He brought a folder, he sat me down at the kitchen table, and laid out in his salesman voice what a wonderful idea it would be to rationalize the family real estate footprint. His parents-in-law would help with maintenance. The grandson would have a yard. I could have the in-law suite over the garage. Everybody wins. I let him talk for 40 minutes. I asked the kinds of questions that made him feel he was making progress. How would the title work exactly? What about my furniture? Would I have my own entrance? When he left, he was practically humming. He hugged me at the door and said, "Dad, this is going to be so good for you. I can already see the weight coming off you." I waved at the car as he pulled out. Then I went inside, sat at the table, looked at his folder, and laughed. I don't think I'd laughed in a month. In early February, I started packing. Not packing to move into a memory care wing. Packing to leave. I sold the boat I'd never used much, my old Boston whaler, to a neighbor's nephew. I sold my truck to a kid down the road. I gave away the riding mower. The furniture I left where it stood. The buyers wanted a turnkey property. The personal things, the photographs, the wedding albums, the box with my wife's letters from when we were dating. Those I packed into 4 cardboard boxes and shipped to a storage unit in North Carolina under a name that wasn't mine. My lawyer arranged it. I bought a small sailboat, 28 feet, fiberglass, well-maintained, single-handed rig. I'd been studying listings for weeks. I paid cash, in person, in a marina south of Boston. I named her after my wife. The man at the marina shook my hand and said, "Where are you headed, Captain?" And I said, "South, as far south as she'll take me." The closing on the house was scheduled for the second Friday in March. The Wednesday before, my son called. "Dad, hey, so listen, we were thinking, you know what, why don't we come up this weekend? My in-laws too. Make a thing of it. Tour the house with everybody. Start visualizing the move." I held the phone away from my ear for a second. Then I brought it back. "That'd be wonderful, son. Saturday work? Saturday's perfect. Bring everybody." I hung up. I sat down on the kitchen floor. I laughed until my ribs hurt. The closing happened Friday morning at the lawyer's office. I signed everything. The wire hit the trust account by 2 in the afternoon. The buyers got the keys at 4. I had until Saturday at noon to be out of the house, a courtesy the buyers had agreed to. Friday night, I slept in my own bed for the last time. I'd taken my wife's wedding ring off the dresser and put it in my breast pocket. The lilacs in the front yard were still bare sticks, but you could see the buds starting. I told them goodbye out loud, which I know sounds soft, but I'd known those bushes longer than I'd known my own son. Saturday morning at 9, I loaded my last duffel into a rental car. I left the house keys on the kitchen counter for the new owners, along with a handwritten note about the quirks of the boiler and which floorboard creaked. I left a separate envelope on the dining room table, addressed to my son. Inside, it was a single folded sheet of paper and one of the cognitive assessment reports. The paper said, in my own handwriting, "I heard you on Christmas Eve. Every word. The house is sold. The money is in a trust you cannot touch. Don't bother looking for me. When you're ready to be my son again, and not my landlord, you can write to my attorney. Her card is enclosed. Until then, Merry Christmas." I locked the door behind me. I drove to the marina south of Boston. I provisioned the boat. I checked the weather. I cast off at 3 in the afternoon on a clear, cold March day with a steady northwest wind. By the time my son's car pulled into the driveway of the house at noon on Saturday, with his wife and his in-laws and his folder, I was already past the harbor mouth. I'd left an old flip phone in the glove box of the truck I'd sold, with my son's number programmed into it. I'd kept the truck buyer's word that he'd hold on to it for a few weeks. So the phone was somewhere on a back road in Maine, charging off a wall outlet, ringing when I checked it 3 days later from a marina in Rhode Island, using a borrowed laptop and the kid's permission. The screen showed 89 missed calls. 89. The voicemail started at noon on Saturday. The first one was confused. Dad, hey, we're at the house. There's people moving stuff in. I think there's been a mix-up. Call me right away. The second one was tighter. Dad, the new owner just told me you sold this house. What is going on? Call me immediately. The third one was my son's wife, her voice gone shrill. By the 8th voicemail, my son was yelling. By the 20th, he was crying. By the 40th, my daughter-in-law's father was on the line, leaving a long, disgusted message about elder responsibility and family obligation, the irony of which I appreciated very much. The last few were quieter, and my son, sounding like he hadn't slept. Dad, please. I don't know where you are. I don't know if you're okay. Please just call somebody. Mom would be ashamed of me. I know that. Please. I sat on the deck of the sailboat that evening with a cup of coffee and watched the running lights of a tanker go by out in the channel. I thought about that last message for a long time. I thought about the boy who'd built model airplanes with me on the kitchen floor. I thought about whether shame is the same thing as remorse, or whether shame is just the noise a man makes when he's caught. I didn't call. Not that night. I sailed south for 6 weeks. I took my time. I put in at small marinas down the coast. Newport, Cape May, Norfolk, Beaufort. I ate at diners. I read paperbacks. I called my lawyer once a week from payphones and prepaid cells. She told me my son had hired an attorney and had tried, briefly, to challenge the sale on grounds of diminished capacity. The 3 cognitive assessment reports had ended that conversation in about 10 minutes. He'd tried to argue undue influence. There was no undue influence to argue. He'd tried to claim a verbal promise of inheritance. Verbal promises don't beat irrevocable trusts. His attorney had told him, in not so many words, to stop wasting his money. His parents-in-law had not, in the end, sold their condo. That deal had collapsed the minute the house disappeared. In Charleston, in late April, I wrote my son a letter. Not a long one. I told him I was alive. I told him I was well. I told him the trust had been structured so that, in the event of my death, the bulk of it would go to a Marine Preservation Foundation and a college fund for my grandson, administered by trustees who were not him. I told him I was not angry anymore exactly, but that I was not coming home, and that the door he'd have to walk through, if he ever wanted to walk through it, was not the door of the house that wasn't there anymore. It was a different door, and it would take him a while to find it, and I would not be hurrying him. I signed it the way I'd signed his birthday cards when he was a kid. Love, Dad. I mailed it from a post office in Charleston with no return address. He wrote back, eventually, through my lawyer, 3 letters over the next year. The first one was defensive and full of justifications I won't bother repeating. The second one was shorter and quieter. The third one, almost a year to the day after Christmas Eve, was just 2 pages, handwritten, no excuses in it at all. He told me his marriage was struggling. He told me his son had asked where Grandpa went and he hadn't known what to say. He told me he understood, finally, what he had almost done. He said he wasn't asking for the house back. He said he wasn't asking for anything. He said he just wanted me to know that he knew. I wrote back. I told him I'd be in Florida for the winter, and that if he wanted to fly down, he could. Alone. No wife, no in-laws, no folder. Just him. He came in February. We had 3 days. We didn't fix everything. You don't fix a thing like that in 3 days, and maybe you don't ever fix it all the way. But we had breakfast. We walked the beach. He cried once, near the end, sitting on a bench by the water, and I let him cry. I didn't tell him it was all right, because it wasn't all right. But I sat with him. That was 4 years ago. I'm 71 now. I still have the boat. I winter in Florida and summer in Maine in a small rented cottage about 80 miles from where the old house used to be. The new owners painted it blue, which my wife would have hated, and I find I don't mind. I see my grandson twice a year. He's 15 now, and almost as tall as I am. He knows the whole story. I told him myself when he was old enough. I figured he deserved the truth instead of whatever shape the family had been going to bend it into. My son and I talk on the phone every couple of weeks. It is not the relationship I wish I had. It's the relationship we earned, both of us, through what happened. And we are working on it, like men work on an old engine. Slowly, with patience, and with no guarantee. Sometimes people ask me, when this story comes up in Marina bars, or at dinners with new friends, whether I regret it, whether I should have just said no, whether I should have sat my son down at the kitchen table on Christmas Day and told him I'd hurt him, and given him a chance to make it right. I think about it. Honestly, I do. But I remember the way his voice sounded in the den that night. Not angry, not desperate. Comfortable, casual. He was already past the part of the decision where I mattered. In his head, I was already gone. The lakeside brochure was already on the kitchen counter. The keys to my house were already in his hand. A clean no doesn't stop a man who's already made the deal in his head. It just buys him another month to find a smarter angle. I learned that on the docks, watching men try to renegotiate contracts they'd already signed. The only thing that stops a man like that is the moment he reaches for the thing he thought was his and finds out it isn't there. I gave my son that moment. It cost both of us. It cost me more than I expected in some ways and less in others, but it was the only moment that was ever going to teach him the lesson he needed to learn. And it was, in its own strange way, the last gift I had left to give him as a father. The wind's coming up out of the southwest now. I can hear it in the rigging from where I'm sitting. There's a front moving through tonight, and tomorrow morning the harbor will be glass. I'm going to make a pot of coffee. I'm going to watch the sun come up over the water. I'm going to call my grandson before his school bus. And then I'm going to go sailing. I've thought about that Christmas Eve more times than I can count. Sitting on the deck of my boat, watching the running lights of other vessels slide by in the dark, I've replayed every word of that conversation in the den, every choice I made afterward, every door I closed behind me, and what I keep coming back to is this. A man's life is the sum of the small decisions he makes when nobody's watching, and the bigger decisions he makes when everybody is. My son didn't become the man in my den that night because of one bad year or one bad influence. He became him slowly, in 1,000 small choices nobody ever called him on. Each time he took something I offered without saying thank you. Each time he asked for a favor and never asked how I was doing. Each time he saw his mother folding his laundry at 35 and didn't think to fold his own. Cause and effect. Nothing more, nothing less. The roof falls because of the small leak you ignored every spring for 10 years. And my own choices that winter weren't free either. I had to build the courage to act, the patience to wait, and the cold-eyed clarity to see my own son for what he had let himself become. 3 things I had to find inside myself, and 3 things I think every person eventually has to find if they want to live a real life. The first is character. The willingness to do the right thing, even when it costs you a relationship you spent 40 years building. The second is wisdom. The willingness to see what's actually in front of you, instead of what you wish was in front of you. And the third is grit. The willingness to follow through when every instinct in your chest is telling you to call him back, fix it, smooth it over, pretend you didn't hear what you heard. The hardest one for me was the second one, because I didn't want to see it. I'd rather have been wrong. I'd rather have been a confused old man misinterpreting a conversation than a clear-eyed father watching his only son plan to take his house. But love that refuses to see clearly isn't love. It's just fear in a nicer coat. I don't tell this story for revenge. The revenge part was the smallest part of it. I tell it because somewhere out there, another father is hearing a conversation in his den right now, and he's going to spend the next week trying to convince himself he didn't hear what he heard. Don't do that. Trust your ears. Trust your gut. And then move slowly, quietly, and with a plan. A house can be sold. Money can be moved. Even a son, given enough time and enough honesty, can sometimes find his way back. But the one thing he can never get back is the years you spent letting someone walk on you because you were too tired or too lonely or too kind to say no. I wasn't too kind. I was just too late getting started.